Welcome to Plus Life, where we get right into it. No holds barred. We're about keeping it real, no stigma, no shame, living life to the fullest. So let's get started. Today, it's all about HIV and self-destructive behavior. Joining me in the studio are my guest, Dr. Chris Donahue. You're a doctor at clinical sexology, human sexuality. That's a mouthful, but you're also an accomplished author and a media contributor. Thank you very much for being here. Michelle Anderson, a former Miss Plus America crown holder. Lovely to have you here. And Tony Ferrone, you've been living with HIV for 20 years and you've battled with addiction. So thank you all for being here. Plus Talk, we're all about keeping it really real. So let's just dive straight into it. Tony, you know, the term self-destructive, I think, can mean lots of things for many people.
Right.
But when we deal with something like an HIV diagnosis, again, different for everyone. I mentioned you're positive 20 years, you battle with addiction. What role has HIV played in that?
Majority of the role. It's probably led the door open for meth abuse, drug abuse, heroin abuse. I mean, I went through the whole gamut of drugs and using them as a mask to hide behind not having to get that rejection from people. So, I mean, in the world that I traveled in, like, nobody asked you any questions about when you walked through the door, and that was comfort. So, I mean, it contributed a huge part.
Chris, how common is that particular theme with an HIV diagnosis? Nobody asks, nobody cares, there's no judgment.
Far too, well, it's far too common that people will develop some sense of shame when they get a diagnosis that kind of possibly others them or places them outside of a cultural norm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what lends people to have, you know, access to a self-destructive pattern. But I think self-destruction is the wrong word, as you kind of put it in air quotes, because I think it puts the blame on you. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a cultural issue, stigmatization, right? And that's what you struggle with. And so I tend to use the word, it's like a trauma response. It's an understandable reaction to something. So that's why we have a show like this, to try to normalize these kinds of dialogues and conversations in the diagnosis so that people don't have to turn to self-destructive behavior to kind of cope with that.
Michelle, I know you're not a fan of the term self-destruction. Why is that? And how would you describe then what you have gone through and what did you go through?
And so I totally agree with Chris. Right, correct.
Yes.
Okay.
We're all getting to know one another.
We're
all near friends.
Call me whatever you need
You
to.
reach a certain age, you start renaming everybody. Okay, so for
1,
me,
2, and 3. Thanks, Michelle.
no problem. So for me, yeah, I have a huge problem with that because when you say self-destruction, it automatically stigmatizes that somebody had to have done something wrong or different to become HIV positive when that is not the case. You know, for me, I've also been living with HIV for 20 years, but I knew that there was systems that created my risk for HIV. Those systems that led me to an HIV diagnosis, being a black girl, being molested when I was a young age, looking for love in all the wrong places because I assumed my mother and father stopped loving me, getting and not being comfortable in my own skin, living in poverty, you know, living in places that may have a high concentration for HIV, or we call community viral load. So it's those things that contribute to the HIV.
So you think it stems way before the HIV diagnosis?
Of course.
And that the behavior, whether we use that term or not, the behavior that leads us to the HIV diagnosis stems from a much sort of longer history of mental anguish or whatever it is. Does that sort of tee up?
And those systems, those systems still exist.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I'm talking to people about PrEP, they'll say that's not for women or that's for gay men.
Which is not true, by the way. Women can take PrEP and should.
Yes, and so we talk the systems of, you know, racism, poverty, homophobia. The information's not out there, and so again, I agree with you. It's very victim blaming to think that someone's diagnosis is because they're at fault or they've done something wrong.
So can you relate to what these two are saying then?
I relate a lot to what she's saying because when I first got to LA, I was 18 and I got scouted at just before my 19th birthday for my modeling agency, and I went on a lot of different calls and stuff like that, and like the uncomfortability I mean, I had more than my fair share of opportunities, I will say, and I let them all go because I couldn't do it. And I would get, like, for instance, telling, you know, like you said, like, telling a makeup artist when I did Playgirl, you had to cover my scars. Well, where are your scars? Well, I got syrup burns on the back of my legs and the crack of my ass on my penis. You know, you're gonna have to cover those with makeup because they're scars. You know, it's just like, it was all so defeating. You know what I mean? To the point where I was working, you know, like I joke about all the time, like I spent 20 years on the box in a pair of Pumas, wet boxers, and a baseball cap, and that was the scene that I was in because that was where I was comfortable. Because if they weren't like pawing on you and you're not right in their face, it's like anything else that would be unprofessional. I couldn't relate to how it would work out for me.
Sorry, so how does one get out of that? How does one stop from that belief? And I think stigma, my gosh, the HIV stigma has such a lot to do with this. But what advice do you give to someone to break that cycle?
I would say the first answer I'd give is more of a macro level answer, which is just education to the general population, so that people are aware of what true risk is, and also people are aware of what preventative measures exist. That would have definitely shifted your situation possibly, right? Because I'm trying to tell everyone has the possibility of contracting an STD, an STI, or HIV, right? We're all, if you're a sexual being, and we have to be more aware of that capacity, and that if someone is diagnosed, that doesn't mean, again, that they've done something wrong. But on an individual level, you know, it's a general question. How do we better deal with any kind of trauma? And I think we just have to work on being a more caring, compassionate culture.
Well, yeah, I think,
internal resources.
yeah, it's all good and well, the court of public opinion.
Right.
Oh, yeah, okay, he does drugs, or she's an alcoholic, or whatever. It's easy for that, but stigma, going back to something you said right at the top, I could put myself in a situation where it didn't have to be a conversation. My HIV did, look, I'm far from perfect. I too have abused substances on and off over the years since I was diagnosed. So I relate to what you're saying. In that world of, you know what, fuck it. I'm so responsible all the fucking time. I just don't want to have to think about that level of responsibility. So I'll put myself in a situation where, as you said, there's not really a question asked, but it's assumed and everyone knows what everyone is doing. And the drugs,
they chase it.
And they chase it. And the drugs, whatever that your drug of choice is that puts you in that place, is an escapism.
But we have to look at what are you escaping from.
That's it.
Right?
You have
Like,
to look at what you're
are we all
escaping from.
perpetuating or creating culturally and socially, or even individually, that you're trying or needing to escape from it? So that's always the question when I'm working with a client that comes in with self-destructive behavior, if we're going to use that word, or an addiction. What's going on in your life that you don't have the meaning or the purpose that would keep you away from that?
Michelle, you blew in here like a bundle of absolute positivity, pardon the pun, and you are, and you have really you have fantastic energy. But you, as you talked about, molestation, drug abuse, all this other stuff. So how have you come out of that?
I was able to get the resources. You know, I was able to connect with people that use their privilege so that I could to create me a space to be able to get the resources that I needed. It hasn't always been easy. You know, for me, like you said, being black, right, being a woman, being
straight.
HIV positive, being straight, you know, I have all these markers against me, being an ex-felon, you know, so it was getting the resources to getting a connection to those resources. Like for even right now, I think my family is like 20-something years old. I still can't get a job.
How did you get that first connection? Because I think there's a lot of people who are watching who look and sound just like you and who don't want to hear what I have to say or what Tony has to say because of our skin color and where we come from. How did you make that first connection?
I said I need some fucking help.
And there's nothing wrong
y'all,
with that.
If y'all don't give me the help, I'm going to go back to what I know I can do. And that is hitting them streets, beating my feet, doing what I need to do to survive. Because it's all, when we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if my food, clothing, shelter is not taken care of, I'm going to go back and do what I need to do to make sure that it's taken care of. Right. No, I don't want to. I don't want to. But again, it's those systems that creates that risk for me to have to do that.
So how do you get people to listen to that? And Tony, how do you get people how do you guys be the change in this?
I'm sitting like having conversations like this.
Thank you.
Having conversations like this,
I mean,
being honest.
Tony, how do we change this so that you don't
I
feel
have a different opinion on it. I don't think anything's changed at all. I think people have an excuse not to talk about it now because they have Truvada. That's the only thing I think has changed. I mean, people don't talk about it. Not in the world I'm in, and I still dabble in the world that I was in before to the world I'm in now.
Talking about HIV.
Yeah. As far as HIV, sex, Grindr,
Right.
all of that stuff, it's all the same as it was when it first came out. It's exactly the same. I mean, there's more information out there for people who know they have a problem when you can recognize it. I didn't know I had a problem when I came out. I was just doing what I was doing.
Do you recognize you have a problem?
Yeah, of course I do. But it's too late. All the damage is done. So what the hell?
Okay, I want to touch on that for a second.
Sure.
All the damage is done. That's like a defeatist to answer right there. The damage is done, so fuck it. I can keep getting fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, as a psychotherapist, one of the most beautiful things I see is that people come into my office, my practice, or any therapy practice, believing that, and then like yourself, they come out on the other end realizing that there is something kind of outside and beyond that. And also just, a lot of the sex that's taking place in our culture and even dating is online these days, right? Like that's the #1 resource for people to find sex and dating. And thankfully, some of these apps are taking some accountability and responsibility for that platform. And there's prep ads on there. There's ads about safer sexuality. They're trying to start the conversation. That's going to be a meaningful shift.
Well, it's also meaningful that, Tony, you come on and talk as blunt and honestly as you have, and I really, really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, because people see versions of themselves in all of us, and I think that's really important. Dr. Chris, what advice do you have for someone who's watching this now, who is Tony, or who is me even?
Community. You can't, on your own, by yourself, feel supported and garner confidence. You know, self-esteem isn't an individual thing. It's reflected back to us. So you have to surround yourself with people that understand your situation and validate you and that. So find community, whether it's an organization, LGBT center, psychotherapy, group therapy.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Is there not a community in the 6 guys getting high on meth, watching porn, insulated for a weekend? Is
Yes,
that
it's easier
is
access.
well no, but does one not go?
Toxic
Actually,
community.
that's my community.
Yeah, toxic community. And that's an example of how the people around you reinforce who you want to be, whether it's a positive or a negative version of yourself. You got to find the positive people.
And I think you have to have endurance to go through the process that it takes to take your route, because there's paperwork involved. There's, taking the time to meet people, whereas my community, take one step back and you're there.
Yeah. What do you think the first step is that someone can take in this journey?
Struggling, wanting to get help, wanting something better. Again, just reaching out to some kind of resource like you talked about, someone that can start to provide the resources to you, because you can't do it on your own. Like, that's the one thing I think we'd all agree.
Yes.
Well, I love that you both said it's not self-destructive.
It's not.
And it really isn't. And also, you're not alone. We're not alone. And you can be squeaky clean and looking like me. And everybody has something that we go through. So I want to thank all of you guys, Dr. Chris, Michelle, Tony, thank you. And I want to thank you. Now, if you want any more information on anything we've talked about on this episode of Plus Talk, go to pluslifemedia.com and make sure you're following us on social media. We are at Plus Life Media. Guys, thank you very much. Stick around. We will post more content up on pluslifemedia.com where we talk a little bit more. I throw these out like that. But for the meantime, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.